Janus and Smite should have a Stargate-themed skin. Smite made Stargate-themed skins for other characters. Sure, they're all from the Egyptian pantheon. I get why that is, given what the franchise is most known for. But Janus is the literal god of gates, along with various other things, and he creates portals to travel through in-game.
An ally has been slain.
Absolute missed opportunity, in my opinion. That messy intro aside, hello and welcome to another Stargate video. And in this one, I want to look at Janus. Janus to me has always been an interesting character. He's one of the few ancients who we know by name, and notably seems to have a different personality from the rest. Most ancients have this, I'm going to call it elder race mentality. They're so old and have seen so much, they really don't have much passion or drive anymore, often acting as authority figures to guide younger races, and at times this can lead them to dismissing the concerns and opinions of said younger races. To be clear, that's not me saying that they didn't care about humans. On some level, I think they all did, and some seem to have developed warmer feelings over time. Like Merlin. When we first saw him thousands of years ago, he kind of dismissed the pleas of a human because he felt there were greater issues at hand. But we later learned he did help humans, and in the present day, he seemed pretty nice and became something of a rebel. Though I think it's important to remember his actions were based on the idea that the Ori were a major threat that had to be dealt with. He might have developed a fondness for some humans, but remember, he also set up his Black Knight hologram to incite terror to the people of Camelot if anyone entered his library. Sure, we can argue about the necessity of him doing that, but there's at least one human dead as a result of this. Getting back to Janus, he just feels different from the others.
That he was just passionate about. I enjoyed watching myself. I thought, oh, good. I was doing the work.
He's bubbly, animated, and more passionate compared to some of the other ancients. And he seems to really care about the pleas of younger races. Though, admittedly, we are only working with one on-screen depiction of him. Something else that sets Janus apart from the others is his fate is kind of a mystery. We know the fate of most of the named ancients. They either died or are stuck in eternal combat with another ascended being. Even the unnamed ones we can assume died long ago or achieved ascension. But Janus is the odd one out because we don't really know what happened to him. The last we saw of him, he walked through the Stargate in Atlantis back to Earth at the end of the Lantean Wraith War. But after that, who knows? And I want to explore that in this video. What was Janus's ultimate fate? And to do that, let's look through what we know about Janus both in the shows and his depiction in the extended media, which I have some opinions on. Starting off with the shows, we don't really know much about Janus. We know he was a brilliant scientist and was active in the Lantean Wraith War 10,000 years ago. One of the things he did during the war was make the Attero device. It was designed to disrupt the Wraith's hyperdrive. Any Wraith ship that entered hyperspace would explode, and if it worked safely, it would have won the Lanteans the war. The problem was that it didn't work safely. The device creates this radiation that messes with the basic functions of the Stargates, causing any gate that is dialed to explode. And keep in mind, the gates are made of naquadah, so they make a pretty big boom.
We could see the explosion from space. I've never witnessed anything that powerful.
The gates are made of naquadah. When they become unstable, the size of the explosion is unimaginable.
Anyway, after a 3-day test, Janus shut down the device. He would separate the control key from it and take it back to his workshop, one he kept secret from the other Lanteans, where he could work on his other inventions, like a personal cloak he never finished. Janus's first, and again only on-screen depiction was in the episode Before I Sleep. In this episode, the Atlantis expedition meets a Weir from an alternate timeline. In this Weir's timeline, the expedition all died shortly after they arrived in the city. This timeline's Weir, Shepard, and Zelenka survived via a time machine that took them back to the final days of the Lantean Wraith War. Though only this Weir would actually end up surviving in the end. She would meet Janus, who built the time machine she used to travel into the past. Janus seems delighted to meet her since her presence proves that one day their people will return to the city. But the rest of the Atlantean Council was not so happy. So she's from the future. Yes. And she's here because of a time machine. Yep, your time machine in the future. Uh-huh. The one you promised you weren't going to make. That is correct. Why are you like this? Yeah, they weren't exactly happy about what Janus had done, as they did not approve of meddling with time. As such, they denied this Weir's request to use the time machine to return to her time, and had the device, along with all material connected with its design, destroyed. However, Janus was a sneaky rascal and kept his research notes, though he wasn't sure if he would be able to remake the time ship with the Council watching him. His final actions before returning to Earth with the rest of the Atlanteans was to ensure the disaster that happened to the alternate Weir's expeditions did not repeat, though this required alternate Weir to stay behind and rotate the ZPMs. While Janus was never seen again, his presence and actions would be felt later. The Attero device would come up again during the Veneer incident, and we would get confirmation that he did rebuild his time machine in the SG-1 episode, It's Good to Be King. SG-1 goes to get Mayborn when they learn the planet he's on is about to be invaded. However, when they arrive, Mayborn revealed that there's this stone pillar on the planet that seemed to be a record of the planet's history. What is incredible about it is that it lists dates and events that haven't happened yet. The stone even gives the approximate date that SG-1 would arrive and save the planet. The theory given in the episode is that someone, probably an ancient, was studying the evolution of life on the planet. They traveled into the future, got the record of the major historical events, then traveled back to carve the stone. And the most interesting thing is that the pillar itself is only a couple of 100 years old, with Daniel saying that this was after the Goa'uld originally left the planet. Now, I don't believe it's ever stated that this ancient was Janus, or that this ship was even his. But like, it's of Atlantean design, Janus is kind of the time travel ancient. Heck, I'm 90% certain this is just the same prop from Before I Sleep. The only reason I could think they would not want to make this Janus's ship is if they ever wanted to go back and tell the story of this ship, but they couldn't get Janus's actor to come back. So the writers might be like, oh, this wasn't Janus's ship, but his protege or someone who found his notes. To me though, it's very likely that Janus did just rebuild his time machine, and I'm going to assume as such for the rest of this video. Watch as one day in the future they decide to bring the time machine or Janus back and they reveal he didn't make this one, and this completely invalidates this whole video. SG-1 would end up using this time machine later during the Mobius episodes, and I'm pretty sure some of the books made use of it as well. However, the episode leaves some big questions unanswered. If this is Janus's time machine, where is he? Why was it left here? Before we try and answer that, let's look at what the external media says about Janus. I should note the external medias are not strictly canon with the shows, but I think it's worth a look. The books attribute the creation of many ancient technologies to Janus. Some are new, like in the book Mirror Mirror, where Janus and his protege Icaros, which is spelled like this, worked on this reality warping supercomputer. The hope was to change history and prevent the Aratus bug from ever evolving. Janus would leave the project as he believed that Icaros was becoming too obsessed after his family was killed in a culling. I might do a video about this book one day because some of the timelines made by this machine are kind of out there. There's a timeline where the ancients became conquerors, one where they regressed to a primitive state, and one where the plan in Before I Sleep failed, to name a few. Again, I might circle back to this one day. Some previous technologies seen in the show were stated to be his creations. For example, in the book Ouroboros, Daniel suspected that Janus was the creator of the quantum mirror. Or in the book Relativity, where Janus made various time travel prototypes on the world Holdfast, such as time travel pods, small handheld pods which basically let one beam into the past using the Stargate. The book also says he made the time loop machine from Window of Opportunity, which I've already given my thoughts on. I don't think that's right, but I don't want to get into it again, so book canon. The biggest addition to Janus's lore is given in the Atlantis Legacy series, which acts as a season 6 of Atlantis and actually gives a hint of where Janus is. In the book The Furies, Taylor is dreaming and is meeting with an ascended Weir. Don't ask, it's a long story. In their meeting, Weir gives hints to the series' big revelation about the Wraith's origin, but she can't say much as the rules of Ascension go. But she said something interesting about Janus. Janus knew, she said, but he did not tell me. Perhaps he told Dr. Jackson, I don't know. If so, he does not remember. This indicates that in the books, she has achieved Ascension and is in the higher planes, at least by the time of the shows. Also, that revelation about the Wraith, I would like to move on from it, but the books also indicate something else about Janus I feel I need to bring up. So in the show, it was theorized that the Wraith came about as a result of the Lanteans seeding humans on a world that had the Aratus bug. As the bugs fed on humans, over time their species began to take on the advantages of human biology. Larger brains, bipedalism, and opposable digits. The books give a different origin. The Legacy series states the Wraith were the direct result of Lanteans experimenting on humans to find immortality in case they couldn't ascend. This is revealed in the book Secrets, with the later book From the Depth stating that Janus was one of the scientists involved in these experiments. And this book has the expedition meet these sentient squids that Janus was also experimenting on. Some achieved ascension, but when the experiment didn't pan out the way he wanted, Janus abandoned the project. He promised to return and move them back to their homeworld he had taken them from, but didn't. Granted, this most likely was because the Wraith revolted against the people experimenting on them, and this led to the war, but yeah. This is something I noticed that the extended medias do with Janus. He's portrayed in a negative light, and the Atlantis comics take this to the next level where he's the main antagonist. In that story, Janus survived to the modern day by putting himself in stasis, which he did to hide from the Goa'uld, which is a detail I actually like. But the way he put himself in stasis left him with some brain damage, and he's partially insane. He wants to kill Shepard, blaming him for what happened to Weir, and he allies himself with the aliens from the Daedalus variations, which the comic says were made by a Janus from another dimension with a directive to eliminate all Wraith across the multiverse. He is eventually cured of his insanity and helps stop the aliens, but he did some pretty awful things. There was this planet in Pegasus that said while they appreciated Janus's aid, they weren't going to sever relations with the expedition. And in response, he blew up their planet. That's pretty hard to forgive someone for, even if they were insane at the time. While Janus was horrified by what he had done, he also didn't really have to worry about it because he, along with Weir, ascended at the end of the story. Also, because I feel like being that nitpicky guy right now, one, this Weir is not the Weir Janus knew. Sure, you could say she lied about knowing him, or that he was too insane to remember that little detail. But two, how did she ascend? She was still in a replicator body at the time. Did Janus help her do it as he ascended? Just something I noticed while reading that I wanted to get out there. Getting back to my main point, I just found it odd that these books and comics portray Janus in this negative light when he wasn't really like that. Sure, you could say he was a little arrogant, a bit of a rebel, but he's a rebel in the same way the Doctor from Doctor Who is. He does what he thinks is right in his heart, even if authority figures around him tell him no. Every society has bad actors, look at the Veneer for example, so I can buy some Lanteans might be willing to perform horrific human experimentation, which sounds like something out of Poppy Playtime. The gods gestured, sometimes they laughed. When she washed, standing in the basin with the sprayer in her hands, the guards made rude remarks about her. Talked about her in ways that no one ever had in her hearing. The way that no man of her people would have permitted. She said nothing, her eyes cast down. Perhaps the retrovirus had affected her mind and she did not understand. But to say Janus participated this is very odd, especially if you consider the Attero device. A lot of people criticize the Lanteans for not using it in the war, which I've done a video on, but someone brought up to me that it was Janus who shut down the project. And given what limited things we saw from him in the show, and this is me speculating here, but he was probably horrified to learn what happened. Imagine you, yes you, watching this video found out you were responsible for the deaths of thousands.
We lost 3,000 people.
All dead because of the device you made that was supposed to save them. If you think about it like that, it's no wonder Janus turned the machine off and disconnected it. But again, the extended media's looked at him and made him this quasi-malevolent force. Though to be fair to the books, the ones that established the Wraith's human origin and the one that says Janus participated in this were written by different authors. And of course, none of this really matters in relation to the shows, as these medias kind of exist in their own universe. At least that's the main idea from a lot of fans. So with all that out of the way, where is Janus? Unfortunately, at this time, there is no definitive answer. There's a few different theories. Some come from the shows, some from the extended media, and some fan speculation. Something kind of interesting is that many of these theories can be interwoven together to make one big theory. Here's an example. Morgan said the ancients did 3 main things when they returned to Earth from Atlantis. Some planted a few small seeds of civilization in the early tribes of man. Others traveled to the Stargate at the South Pole, most likely to leave the planet and do something. Maybe these ancients helped set up the 4 Great Race Alliance, or maybe they left to live new lives elsewhere. It's not clear. And finally, some chose to spend their time in seclusion and meditation to achieve ascension. Now, we don't know what Janus did, but Janus was the name of a Roman god. And I mean Roman. He is a Roman-born god and doesn't have a Greek equivalent. We know that in Stargate's version of Earth that the Romans are said to have been taught road building from the gods they called the Ancient Ones. And Latin itself is based on the language of the ancients. To me, this points to Janus most likely helping in teaching a young humanity. Partly because he seemed to show a genuine fondness for humans, but also because it would have been a good cover to work on his time machine without the others noticing. At some point, he must have finished the ship and left. And at this point, what he did is kind of up to speculation. Personally, I like to think he would have become like the Doctor, exploring the timeline and going on wacky adventures. Maybe he picked up a Roman companion when he left. Again, that's my headcanon, but whatever he did, we know that at some point he took his ship to the planet with a stone pillar. But like I said near the start of the video, if this is his ship, where is he? Well, we sadly don't know, but I have a theory. If he was time traveling, he most likely experienced events out of order. He might have been in the future and learned that in the past, SG-1 found his ship and all they did with it. So later on, when he got older and retired from time traveling, he left it where SG-1 would find it and carved the stone, completing the time loop. From there, I see 3 possible ends to his story. First, he died. Assuming he stops traveling in his old age, he might have just settled down somewhere and passed away.
Janus isn't dead. We never saw him die. I'm just putting that out there in the ether. Sprinkle, sprinkle.
There's also the possibility that he is alive. Daniel did say the carvings in the stone pillar were only a couple hundred years old. We don't know what the lifespan of an ancient was, but the oldest Nox can reach the age of 500 years. I think it's safe to assume the ancients can live for just as long, probably longer. So it's entirely possible he's still out there. Personally, I like to think he settled down somewhere like on a farm or something.
Really? Man of your talents? It's a peaceful life.
Finally, he might have ascended. I can see him not ascending when the ancients first returned since he still had a passion and youthful spirit. But in this theory, he's older and he might be willing to sit down and finally join the others. However, this is just one theory, and like I said, with all the explanations, you can kind of mix and match ideas. Maybe he put himself in stasis after he returned, or he's in stasis right now after he dropped off the ship. Maybe he didn't stay on Earth and went to the South Pole. There's honestly so many ways you could write his story. One interesting theory I've seen is that Janus is the father of Reath, the android who made the Replicators. This is part of a theory that Reath was made by Lanteans who left Earth after their return. It's an interesting idea. Janus, out of all the Lanteans, does seem the most likely to make an android, ignoring the mistake of the Asurans. This mentality does line up with the big clash he had with the rest of the Council. They banned the development of time travel technology, partly due to the danger with said technology. I like to think they learned this lesson with the time loop machine, but Janus thought he knew better. And in this situation, maybe he thought he could do better with Reath. Though this does mean he would have been killed by the Replicators. So kind of a sad thing to think about. Ultimately, the fate of Janus to me is one of those mysteries I don't think gets a lot of attention. I'd be curious if the new series or any future projects tackle the Janus question. But what do you all think? Do you like the theory I presented in this video? Or do you have some theories of your own? Are any based on the ideas I presented in this video, or are they ideas I didn't cover? Tell me your thoughts in the comments below, leave a like and subscribe, follow me on my social medias, and remember...
Of course, Janus refused to concede defeat. The more someone told him not to do something, the more he had to do it.